you managed to get that sorted.
Yeah, I know. Plus, afterwards, I said to the guy, more like Campagnolo.
No.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Are you alright? What's wrong?
I sense a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of plastic lever arms suddenly cried out in terror, only to be replaced with aluminium. I fear something incredible has happened.
Hello there.
Right, so it's sponsor time, and I'll be as quick as I can. And I'm reporting out from the wild today with Sirocco coming in again as a sponsor for the episode. So that is pretty cool. And yeah, I've got some of their gear on, as always, because I wear it on every ride now. And this is their Furka Pass cycle jacket. And it's, become an absolute staple of my cycle wardrobe, actually, because this time of year in Cornwall, the weather is so freaking changeable. I mean, look, it's blue skies over there, but it's actually just started to rain, yet the sun is out. I don't know what's going on. So yeah, this jacket really, really great. So the fabric is really nice, it's comfy, it's also a little bit stretchy, so it sort of conforms to your body as you're cycling along. Plus, if you get caught in a little shower, not a problem, because this is it's waterproof. And also this zipper is really good quality as well. I think a lot of people overlook that, but the quality of the zipper is really nice. It's quite chunky. Anyway, these are their K3 cycle glasses. Again, every single ride I got these bad boys on. I actually had clear lenses in this morning because I was on this very road at like 11 p.m. last night, because I quite like cycling in the pitch black. So I swapped them out for these photochromic lenses because they kind of adapt to the available light, and I knew the sun would be popping in and out today. So yeah, anyway, Sirocco basically do some wicked cycle gear, in my opinion, and it's really great quality and really good value. So if you want to kind of get yourself kitted out for some crispy spring cycling, then yeah, use my link in the description down below and get yourself an extra 10% off your order, which is pretty cool. Anyway, enough of that. I'm gonna finish off my ride this afternoon, and yeah, let's check out these shifters, shall we? Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another absolutely bloody amazing Trace Velo production. My name, as always, is it's Luke. Okay, so that's a stain from lunch on my shirt there. I didn't notice, and it's there for the whole episode. Here at Trace Velo, I work hard to keep this show firmly below average. Yeah, it's Luke. So, way back in May last year, I took my very first steps into the wondrous world of 11-speed group sets with Sensar Empire. Now, to my knowledge, the setup that I fitted was actually the second revision of the group set, as the OG Sensar Empire, so version 1, had a metallic grey colour scheme, as reviewed by the reverential Joe from China Cycling. So between versions 1 and version 2, apart from the obvious cosmetic changes, so they updated from a grey, metallic grey to a glossy black colour scheme, they also changed a few features of the design as well. So I believe they changed this B-screw adjustment plate here on the rear derailleur from plastic to metal, and as well they put an additional trim position on the front shifter, so it went from 2 to 3, I believe. But all that aside, about 400 to 500 miles into using the second revision of the group set on my old bike, so these shifters here, in fact, this little incident happened to me while I was out on the bike. Right, so I was out in Surrey, just on a ride, and one of the shifters broke. So it was the shifter for the front derailleur, and this little lever arm which sits in here, it's made of plastic and it's just snapped right off. You can see there the plastic's just sheared. So I'm running one by, so I've got a one by setup now. Just the rear is working currently. So yeah, always look on the bright side, eh? Never used one by before, so now's a great time. You can see in the bottom that little piece of plastic there. Doesn't exist on this one anymore because it's in my hand. Yeah, anyway, bit of a pain, but I'll get over it. So yeah, that little plastic lever straight up snapped on me while I was out on a ride, so I couldn't shift at the front. So yeah, not super impressive. And it didn't appear to be a one-off either, as a number of you folks actually contacted me to let me know the same thing had happened to you. So yeah. Anyway, the upshot of all of this is that Sensar updated their design, and I'm not sure if it's a direct result of the video that I put out. Maybe it was, I don't know. Anyway, that little plastic piece is now made out of metal, and I went ahead and bought the updated shifters with my own cold hard cash. So yeah, let's check these things out. Okay, cool. So I've removed the rubber hoods so we can get a better look at the internals, and these are the shifters for the rear mech or the rear derailleur. We have the older version 2 on the left, and this is the updated version 3 on the right, which I'll be installing on the bike later. So to quickly demonstrate, this is how they function. You have your brake lever here, and to make a shift, you push the brake lever over in much the same way as you would on a Shimano shifter. So on Sensar, when you push the brake lever over, it engages this little lever arm, which in turn engages a ratchet mechanism inside the kind of shifting mechanism in the body of the shifter. So big swing to move up the range, small swing to move down. So that's up 2 and that's down 2. So this particular shifter for the rear mech, this never actually failed me and still works fine. So you can see on this old version, if I zoom in, yeah, this lever arm here, this is plastic. Well, it's difficult for you to see, but it's plastic. It's glass fiber reinforced plastic, but it's plastic nonetheless. Whereas on the new one, if I show you, there it is, this part is actually metal now. I'm not sure of the particular alloy, but it's non-magnetic, and I dug into it a little bit on the back here with this file, and it certainly feels a hell of a lot like aluminium, or aluminum, as those beautiful patriots across the pond would say. So I don't know whether this updated arm here, I don't know whether this is cast or machined from a billet, but it definitely appears to be aluminium, so that's pretty cool. A decent upgrade for sure. Should be a bit more durable. As for other differences between the two, I've compared them and had a really good look. And the only other difference I can spot is this one. So on the old version, there's a small plastic insert on the brake lever here. So that means when you engage this lever arm to make a shift, I guess this little insert here cushions the plastic of the lever arm slightly, maybe reduces friction. But either way, this has been omitted on the new design. You can see there's nothing there. It's aluminium against aluminium, so I suspect it will be totally fine. But I've been I've been proved wrong in the past. I guess it might be slightly more noisy as well as you're going down the road. Maybe this will make a bit more noise. But ultimately, we've got to get it on the bike, and time will tell. So these are the shifters for the front mech or the front derailleur. And again, this is the older version 2 on the left, and this is the updated version 3 on the right. And this is actually the offending shifter, because you can see there's just a massive void here where that plastic lever arm used to live. And here it is on the table. So yeah, if you want to see this in a little bit more detail and a little bit of discussion as to why I think this failed in the first place as well, then go and check out my original video on the topic. But yeah, same as before, the lever arm is made of aluminium on this updated version, and this little plastic insert, that's also not present on the new one as well. Now I'll throw up some close-up pics if this doesn't come across on camera, but I've also spotted something else. So on the old one here, this little ratchet piece, which is part of the shifting mechanism, has a gold hue, and something tells me it could be a sintered metal part because the surface finish looks a bit grainy, but this could also be a result of the die cast mold. I'm not too sure. Regardless, on the newer version, the color of this same part is much darker. That's it right there. And I think this is due to the fact that this is heat treated steel. My little file here, it definitely seems to skate over this new metal part a little bit easier than it does on this older gold version. It tends to bite a little bit more into that. But at the end of the day, I'm not a metallurgist, so yeah, if you know better, definitely let me know in the comments. More than happy to be proved wrong on this. But yeah, overall, the finish on this part seems to be far superior on the new version. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, lastly, let's compare the weight between the two, because I know I'll get some questions on it otherwise. Now, I can only reliably compare the weight of the shifters for the rear, because as you've seen, the original shifter for the front derailleur is broken, and I can't reliably compare the weights. So for the rear derailleur, this is the original shifter with the plastic lever arm. comes in at 214 grams. Obviously we've omitted the hoods, but it doesn't matter, you can still compare. And on the newer one with the metal shifting arm, 213. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. That's a gram. I mean, take weight savings where you can get them, right? Also, for those wondering, the total weight of the Sensar components, so we're talking both shifters and both derailleurs, comes out to 761 grams. Now, the equivalent 105 R7000 gear, 805, so a little lighter than the competition, which is always cool. Also quickly, I just want to mention the actual way that you change gear and the way these work on the bike. Between the two versions, they function in exactly the same way. So in terms of using it on the bike, there's no difference. Anyway, all that aside, let's get these new shifters installed. Okay, cool. So before I start ripping this bike apart and getting the new updated Sensar Empire installed, I wanted to give you a quick update on the L2 R9 group set that I've had on my bike for a little while now. So if you're not bothered by that, fair enough, you can use the YouTube chapters function on the progress bar to skip ahead. But for those of you that are interested, low key, I have been pretty impressed with this little group set actually. So I think it's pronounced L2, not L2, but regardless, this is the cheapest 11-speed group set I have ever bought or ever fitted to a bicycle. So for both shifters and the front and the rear derailleur, 77 quid is what I paid. Like an incredible value, if you ask me. Now, installation was an ordeal in and of itself. I mean, the shifters started to eat themselves actually, but that's covered in more detail in the full review up here. Bing. But yeah, since installing it in January of this year, I've put 450 miles through this group set. And during that time, I've had like no problems really. Performance has actually been pretty good. I expected things to break and things to go wrong, but yeah, it's been pretty solid. So once it's all set up, shifting is actually nice and crispy. And I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that for the price, the quality of the front and the rear derailleurs is pretty high. So that's pretty cool. Now, two things I don't like. This little plastic lever arm has a tendency to bounce around and clack and kind of bump into this metal brake lever here and make quite a lot of noise as you're going down a bumpy road. And ergonomically, they're not great. So you only have access to the full range of gears when you're on the tops here. So this is how you shift up and that's how you shift down with that thumb trigger. And you can't access that thumb trigger from the drops. So that's a bit of a pain, but you get used to that quite quickly. And if I'm completely frank, I've enjoyed using this L2 or L2 group set far more than I did the Sensar Empire that I had fitted onto my other bike last year. Most of that is due to the fact that the shifting at the back is just far more reliable and far more responsive than I found the Sensar Empire to be. So I'm really interested to see how the updated Sensar Empire fares against these L2 shifters. So yeah, I mean, I just want to give props to this little group set. I expected it to basically fail and break after a few miles, but credit where credit's due, 450 miles with no issues, which is a lot more than can be said for the original Sensar Empire that I had on my bike. So yeah, anyway, all that aside, let's get this new Sensar Empire installed. Right then, ladies and gents, step one is to crack open a beer because it's Sunday. So I've got Brewdog, Clockwork, Tangerine. It's actually a really nice one, this one. Yeah, the actual step one is get this bar tape off. So let's crack on. So bar tape removal, easy peasy, just peel it off, basically. You can always reuse bar tape if you like, but the stuff on here was incredibly cheap and it was quite worn out as well, so it went in the trash. Right, cool, so the bar tape is all off. Next thing, I'm gonna start removing some cables. So I'm gonna start with the gear cables for the rear and the front derailleur, but I can't just pull them straight out of the frame. Before that, I've actually got to run cable guide tubes over the top of the cables because the cables are internally routed all the way through the frame. So this is what cable guide tubes look like, literally just white tubes. And if I show you, yeah, just hollow white tubes. Now, a lot of people have asked me where I've actually got these from, and my stack of guide tubes I've actually got from new frames that I've bought in the past, because they always have these sticking out of the frame when you get it out of the box new, so that you can run the cables the first time. But if you're really struggling to find these, some cabling kits have them when you're looking online. If not, ask a local bike shop. I'm sure they've got mountains of these just lying around. Anyway, I'm gonna get these fitted, pull out the cables, and I'll check back in a second. Right, so this step can be a bit fiddly, as sometimes the guide tubes can get snagged and won't easily run over the cables in the frame, but be patient and keep your cool. Groundbreaking advice for you there. Okay, cool. So off camera, I removed the chain and I've stuck it in the ultrasonic cleaner back there, and this cassette will be going in as well because it's disgusting. Anyway, the cable guide tubes are in place. You can see I've got the run for the rear derailleur here, obviously that runs through the chainstay tube, and you might be able to see I've got a few poking out the bottom of the frame there and also at the top. So these are the runs for the front and the rear derailleur, and importantly, I've stuck them to the frame, because if one of these cable guide tubes falls out while you're cabling and falls through the frame, add 6 hours to your cabling job as you fumble around trying to feed a cable through an opening in the frame that you can't see that's the size of a gnat's butthole. I think as a person recabling a bike, you make this mistake once and never again. So use a little bit of tape. Just trust me, your sanity will thank me. Anyway, next up, we'll be removing the brake cables from the frame. Unfortunately, the brake cable housings or outers run all the way through the frame for the front and the back brake. So I can use them as kind of cable guide tubes in and of themselves. With the gear runs for this bike, their housings stop at the frame, so they have frame stops. So it's only the cables themselves which run through, which necessitates the need for these guide tubes. But with the brake runs, that brake cable housing, that runs all the way through the frame, so I can use them as the guide tube. So yeah, let me get the brake cables out now, and I'll check back in with you in a few seconds. So removing these was a doddle. As I mentioned, no need to run cable guide tubes with these brake runs, so I just pulled the cables straight out basically. Now, I could potentially reuse some of these cables, but as replacement ones are so cheap, I tend to use new cables each time. Okay, cool. So I should be in a position now to start slapping the new Sensar gear on the bike, because I'm going to be reusing the existing cable housings or cable outers that are run through the bike. But if you're doing this job yourself and you notice that these are a little bit ropey, maybe they're a couple of years old and they're starting to rust, I have a whole video dedicated to recabling the bike, including replacing the housings on a frame very similar to this that's internally routed up here. Bing. So check that out if you want to see that entire process in a bit more detail. But for those of you that watched the initial build video, you will remember that the brake cable run for the rear brake, I ended up having to use 2 different varieties of compressionless housing. Now, I use compressionless housing because with these mechanical disc brake calipers here, if you use special compressionless housing, the brake feel is a lot more snappy and it's a lot more responsive. But I didn't have a long enough run of one single variety to go all the way from the back of the shifter, through the bars, through the frame, and out into the back of the caliper there. I think that run is like 1.5 meters long. So through the frame, I have this Jaguar KEB-SL Kevlar compressionless stuff. And then through the frame, I've run this AliExpress compressionless housing here. And these are little individual aluminium cups. It wasn't really ideal, but I didn't have a long enough run of either to do the whole length. So I joined them up like so. And what I'm going to do is replace those 2 different varieties with one long run of this Jaguar Kevlar stuff. So I've got the run there because I think it's going to increase the brake feel and make it a little bit more responsive, but I guess we'll see. Anyway, if I'd have done like this job properly to begin with, I wouldn't be facing this issue, but I kind of had to roll with the punches and just bodge it along the way. But I'm going to remedy that now. So I'll get that done and then we can start putting the Sensar stuff on the bike. So yeah, give me a few minutes.
A few moments later.
Okay, cool. So that is now fitted. So you can see the Jaguar cable starts here, the housing starts here, runs all the way through the bar, pops out the bottom, into the frame, through the chainstay tube, and into the back of the shifter there. So that is one long continuous run of housing. So I'm hoping that will improve the braking performance at the back. And while I was at it, I also replaced the front brake housing with the same Jaguar compressionless stuff, because it was using this AliExpress housing, which I'm wondering if it's any good really, but we'll see. Hopefully replacing it with this presumably higher quality housing from Jaguar is going to improve the braking performance at the front, but time will tell. So next up, let's talk about the shifters. So I've put one shifter on and I just need to get the other shifter fitted. So what I'll do is I'll take that bolt out, probably leave this clamp in place because it's quite nice and snug there, and just put the Sensar shifter, just pop that on because the bolt is compatible with the Sensar one. And yeah, let me have a quick chat now about how to recable this. Right, so once the bike is in this state, it looks really messy, but we're actually nearing the end point, and recabling is actually a breeze now because all the cable housings are in the right place and we've got the cable guide tubes in the right place for the frame. So when you're recabling Sensar Empire, I always put the brake cable housing underneath the gear, because the brake cable housing goes into the back of the shifter here in that little channel there. So I'll stick that in there. And then the gear cable housing, or outer, runs across the top of the shifter and fits into that hole there. So that's where the gear cable run goes, and then the brake underneath. And it's the same on the other side, gear on top, brake underneath. So I'll get the new Sensar shifter fitted and get it recabled. So it should only take me maybe 10-15 minutes to get this recabled, and I'll check back in once we fit the front and the rear derailleurs. So yeah, let's crack on. Right, so when doing any recabling on your bike, make sure to use a good bit of grease on the ends of the cable housings. For example, where they insert into the back of the shifters, because the steel inside the housings can easily rust if you ride in the rain or you leave it outside. In addition, I tend to coat the actual cables running through them with a thin layer of oil, just to help things slide through and reduce any friction that might occur. Right, great, so I've got all the cables now run through the bike. So let me show you what we've got going on. So at the front here, we've got the shifter cabled in. So gear over the top, brake underneath, and again, gear over the top, brake underneath. So if I show you, this is the front brake for me, and this is the rear brake. I think it's the other way around to the way that people usually have it in the UK, but it's just the way I prefer it. So if I show you, pull this one, front brake, all working great. And then this is the rear, like I said, so I'll pull this one, and you should be able to see, bada bing. And this rear brake seems to be nice and snappy and a bit more, well, less spongy basically than the last implementation. So high hopes for this new cable run for this. Anyway, next up, we got to replace these, these derailleurs, because I've still got the L2 ones on there. So I'll be sticking on these fancy schmancy Empire ones, Sensar ones, and it's just a straight swap, as you might imagine. Just pop that in its place, and same again for this rear one there. So just undo this bolt, and then pop this one in its place. And I'll also cable them up. That'll take 2 seconds, as we've already got the cables coming out here. And yeah, then all that's left is to get the bar tape on. And in terms of bar tape, I've actually got some decent stuff here. So I got this for Christmas as a present, and it looks green, but I'm hoping it's more yellow, so it goes with my new neon bar. But anyway, let me get these derailleurs attached, and I'll check back in to fit the bar tape.
The following day.
Right, so it's Monday morning. It's the next morning. I've got a coffee, and I've got to start work in a few minutes. So let's make this quick. Nice coffee. Right. So the bike is finished, the cabling is all done, and the new bar tape is on. Now, firstly, I don't like this bar tape very much. I don't like this graduated color pattern. I don't like the feel of it, and it was a real pain to get on basically, and to get looking nice. Plus, the color doesn't match my forks. So I've actually got some regular old black bar tape in the cupboard there. So I'll be taking this stuff off, keeping this for spares, and putting the black bar tape on. Now, in all honesty, the cabling yesterday did take a little bit longer than I was initially anticipating. So not only did I end up replacing both of the cable runs for the brakes, but also you might recall there was a barrel adjuster sat here before on this cable run. It's now up the top there. Not sure if you can see that in there, because I actually ended up having to replace this. It wasn't quite long enough. So I replaced this cable run here. And in addition, out the back here, this cable outer run or cable housing run was only about that long before. And Sensar Empire, just for some reason, requires or prefers a much longer, shallower curve out the back. I've tried to kind of use a shorter run to keep things looking a little bit neater for Sensar Empire, but for whatever reason, this derailleur is a little bit finicky and prefers a shallower curve to kind of reduce as much friction as possible. So I found that with a larger piece out the back, it makes shifting a little bit more reliable. So anyway, I've also had a quick go on it because I was so desperate to see what these new shifters were like. I've done about 12 miles on it, and I am cautiously optimistic. The shifting, especially at the front, is leagues better than it was before. Just feels a lot more positive, a lot more robust, so I've got high hopes. Anyway, I've got to put some more miles on this bad boy, so I'm going to replace the bar tape, and yeah, let the testing commence. Okay, so right now I am 400 miles into this group set, but some of you are probably asking yourself, if you haven't typed out the comment already, why didn't you buy the Sensar Empire Pro? So the 12-speed variant. And there's one simple reason, and it's cost. So not only is this group set much cheaper to buy up front, but also 11-speed chains and cassettes, so replacement parts, are much cheaper and easier to get hold of than their 12-speed brethren.
Now, some of you might also be wondering, well, in that case, why didn't you go for the 10-speed group set that Sensar offers? I think it's called the Quantum with a V? Quantum? I don't really know. But anyway, the problem is you can't really buy lightweight components for 10-speed group sets. Not for a good price anyway. So upgrades later down the line are a lot more difficult with 10-speed group sets. But the market is absolutely flooded at the moment with some really interesting and well-priced upgrades for 11-speed setups. So 11-speed is definitely the sweet spot at the moment, in my opinion, hence my choice here today. Anyway, all that aside, let's crack on with this review. Okay, cool. So I thought I'd give you a little demo of what this group set's actually like to use out on the road here. So just about to hit a little bit of a hill. So let's get into the lowest gear at the back. So I'm in the lowest gear at the back now. And if I try and change up again, you'll hear, you're greeted with a little click and nothing happens. And this reminds you that you're at the lowest gear at the back and there's nowhere else to go. So this kind of safety feature with that little bit of feedback, I found that's normally reserved for much more premium group sets. So it's really nice to see here actually. So what I'll do now is I'll dump out some gears at the back, and downshifts on this group set are honestly dreamy. So that's 2 there. Let's get up and boogie for a little bit. That's another 2. So downshifts are great. Upshifts at the back require a little bit more practice and a little bit of muscle memory. So that's 1 upshift there. And if I want to do 2, I'll give a full swing of the lever like so, and that's 2 upshifts at the back there. And in terms of shifting up at the front, I'm in the smallest chainring at the back, sorry, at the front at the moment. So let's upshift into the large chainring, and historically, well, at least for the previous iteration, this was a bit of an issue. So this time, that's it, boom, it's done. So smooth, no fuss, no hassle, just super duper easy. Much better than the previous iteration. So dropping down into the small chainring now, 2 clicks, and I'm in the small chainring. So again, no drama, no hassle, easy peasy. So yeah, honestly, I am really enjoying using this group set. Let me just turn around here. You give me a second. So yeah, in all honesty, I was not expecting this group set to be this good. I was kind of prepared for this thing to be a little bit shocking. But honestly, now I've got it on the bike, really enjoying using it. It certainly feels a lot more premium than kind of the price paid for this thing. I mean, this is a cheap group set, yet when you're actually out on the road using it, it's got some nice little features and certainly feels premium. And at least in this iteration, the shifting is actually really reliable. So I'll be keeping it on the bike for the time being. And like I said, yeah, really nice. I feel like Sensar have definitely nailed it this time. Okay, so as that clip demonstrated, I'm actually really enjoying using this group set at the moment. But let's keep things nice and clinical and do the positives and the negatives, at least as I see them. And let's start with the positives. Number 1, downshifts at the rear are unbelievably good, better than any group set that I've ever used. Now, I've never used an electronic group set like Di2 before, but I imagine it feels something like this. So a light click of the shifter and the change at the back is immediate. So yeah, downshifts at the rear, bellissimo. Number 2, upshifts and downshifts at the front derailleur are now, they're great. So much better than the previous version that I used before. It just feels effortless. And that new aluminium lever arm in there that I showed you, it just feels so much more robust when you're using it. And I hate to jump the gun, but I have a really good feeling that this group set is gonna last. Number 3, that little click that I just demoed when you're in the lowest gear at the back and you try to change up again. I love that feature. So where I live, as soon as I'm out the door, I'm on like a 10-11% incline for about 2 miles. And I'm really trying to stay in the saddle and spin up the hills, because my instant gut reaction is to just drop some gears at the back, stand up and like smash it up the hills. But if I did that, I'd burn out after like an hour around here. So like I said, I'm trying to stay in the saddle, and knowing you're in the lowest gear without having to keep looking down at the cassette is a really nice feature. And as I mentioned, on a lot of the cheaper group sets, that feature doesn't exist. A prime example of that being the L2 R9 group set that I had on here before. It didn't have a feature like that, and you just had to keep kind of looking down to check. So yeah, on Sensar, it's a feature I use all the time, and I really like it. Right, onto the negatives, and number one, upshifts at the back on Sensar require a little bit of practice and a little bit of kind of muscle memory as well. So on Shimano, let me demonstrate. This is a 105 shifter. When you're upshifting through the rear, the shifter itself snaps into position. So it's very obvious that you've kind of hit an upshift because the lever arm provides kind of a bit of feedback for you. On Sensar, it's not really like this. So you sweep the arm across, and as you do, you kind of pass through upshift positions, and the lever arm itself doesn't really provide any feedback to let you know. Hence the reason you need to kind of remember via muscle memory where to position that shifter to hit the upshifts that you want. Now, you get used to this very quickly, and in fact, I never miss a shift now when I'm out and about using Sensar. But if you're not paying attention, you can maybe sweep up through more upshifts than you initially intended to. Number two, the rubber that Sensar uses on their shifters is not very good, in my opinion. Now, the rubber has shrunk onto the shifter body a little bit since installation, but it's still a bit looser than I would like. Now, admittedly, prior to install, I removed the rubber hood totally because I think it's necessary to get the cabling in the right place, and then used a little bit of alcohol gel to help slide the rubber hood back onto the shifter body. But maybe that's where I'm going wrong, and you don't need to remove that rubber entirely prior to install. So let me know in the comments below if that's the case. But either way, let me show you this. So this is the L2 shifter that I pulled off recently, and this shifter has done a similar amount of mileage, but the rubber is still really nice and taut, and it just seems much better quality. So yeah, basically the rubber that Sensar uses, it's not very good in my opinion. Number three, one specific gear change at the back has proved a little temperamental, and here's a clip. Okay, so I've been out and about using Sensar Empire, cruising around on the road for a number of days now, and shifting is absolutely flawless everywhere up and down the range, apart from this one scenario. So I'm in the big ring, and it's the upshift from gear 10 to gear 9, where it sometimes catches itself out. So I'll try and recreate the issue for you right now. So I'm cruising along, I'm in the 7th gear, down to 8, 9, 10, 11, absolutely fine. So from 11 to 10, fine, got that one, absolutely no problem. It's this next upshift from 10 to 9 where it sometimes gets caught out. So you can see we're ticking away because it's not quite made the upshift. Let's try and catch it again. So 11, 10, 9. See, that time it went down to 10, up to 9 again. There, we got it that time. Let's try again. So we're on 11, 10, 9. Yep, all good. We'll try one more time. Yeah, so you can see from 10 to 9, occasionally it just doesn't quite make the shift. Let's try one more time. Yeah, so you can see it's a very intermittent problem, and it kind of pops in and out of existence, seemingly randomly, basically. And I have fiddled around with this barrel adjuster so much recently, trying to tweak it. And there's probably people screaming at the screen being like, just tighten it up a tiny bit more to give it that extra impetus to go up the range. But if I was to do that, it would then struggle to drop down from 9 to 10. So trust me, this is the very best that I can do. And in fact, I actually had this same issue on the previous iteration of Sensar. Essentially, when you get this far down the range, the cable tension is slacker, and for whatever reason, it makes the derailleur itself a little bit sluggish, and it doesn't quite snap between the positions as readily as it does further up the range. Yeah, so when you're out on the road, in fact, this issue is even more intermittent, because when you're kind of bumping around, going over little bumps in the tarmac, it tends to jolt the derailleur around a tiny bit and seats it in the correct position. So shifting out on the road is better than I've demonstrated here. But like you've just seen, the upshift from 10 to 9 can sometimes get caught out with this stock derailleur. Okay, so there you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, the positives and the negatives. Now, the positives definitely outweigh the negatives in my opinion, and out and about on the road, this is a really
Oh, delicious experience on the shifting. Anyway, I still have one more trick up my sleeve. Now, Sensar Empire allegedly uses the same cable pull ratios as a SRAM. So I went ahead and bought myself a SRAM Rival rear derailleur, medium cage. Now, Rival is an 11-speed offering from SRAM. And yeah, this thing, it wasn't cheap actually. It was like, I think it was over 60 quid for this. Anyway, I went ahead and slapped it on the bike to see if using a higher quality rear derailleur from SRAM could really crank Sensar Empire up to 11, baby! No, it's not made any difference at all. So I'm out here on Bodmin Moor this afternoon, testing it out, and you can see down here, I've got the SRAM Rival rear derailleur on the back, and I can't tell any difference between this one and the stock Sensar derailleur. They perform basically identically as far as I can tell. But still, it's good to know that if something on your SRAM 11-speed group set, so SRAM Rival or SRAM Force, goes wrong or goes dodgy or something, you can replace it with something from Sensar because they appear to be cross-compatible, which is cool. Yeah, anyway, back to it. Okay, so I wanted to cover this off quickly because I posted a poll on my channel recently about trim positions on the front derailleur because I never make use of them. However, judging by the results, which you can see here, more people than I thought actually made use of trim positions at the front. However, quite a lot of you apparently didn't know what they were, and on Sensar Empire, they're pretty unavoidable actually. So let's cover this topic off. Trim positions basically allow you to do something called cross chaining. So this is where you're either in the big ring at the front and the biggest sprocket at the back, or the small ring at the front and the smallest sprocket at the back. So in either of these two positions, the chain is stretched diagonally across the drivetrain, basically to its maximum. And often it means the chain will interfere or rub against the front derailleur as you turn the pedals. Trim positions basically allow you to marginally change the position of the front derailleur to eliminate that rubbing and essentially kind of access the full range of gears on your bike. In the case of Sensar Empire, there are actually 3 trim positions for the front derailleur. So this means to move from the very top to the very bottom position of the front derailleur, you actually need to click the shifter on Sensar 3 times. Now this isn't a big issue for me, and judging by the poll, there are definitely a couple of you that are going to make use of all these trim positions, but still, I think this is worth pointing out. Anyway, let's move on. In my opinion, Sensar have really stepped up their game with this updated group set. It feels really great to use out and about on the road, and those updated aluminium arms inside have made all the difference when compared to the last version. I mean, it's difficult to sort of tangibly demonstrate for you, but it feels snappier and more responsive than the previous version I tested out. Now, is it as good as Shimano 105? I wish I could say it was, but it's just not. Now, don't get me wrong. When you've got it on the bike, using it and shifting out on the road, it feels great. But there's just a level of refinement with Shimano 11-speed group sets that's not quite present with the Sensar Empire. But one must bear in mind that Sensar Empire is 1/3, maybe even less, the cost of an equivalent 105 setup. It does exactly the same job, and if you set it up properly, performance comes damn close, if you ask me, to 105. Now, it won't be for everybody, and there are certain aspects, like the rubber on the hoods that's a bit subpar, but for the price and how it handles on the bike, this is the new 11-speed budget king in my book. Now, a few little notes before we finish. The stock derailleur can handle an 11 to 32 tooth cassette on the back, or at least that's what I've been running with no real issues. The front derailleur that gave me such problems on the previous iteration of this group set has been absolutely fine. Shifting at the front has been pretty flawless actually, which has been great. And the updated brake cable housings, that Jaguar stuff that I put in during the install, has made a really kind of noticeable difference to braking. So it's a lot snappier than it was. Now, it's worth pointing out that Joe from China Cycling had pretty much this setup. So we're talking Sensar shifters paired with these pretty cheap hydraulic disc brake calipers. I'll put a picture up there. And he thought they were
trash basically. I have actually got on quite well, and the braking performance has been, has been nice, and I like them. But as a little sneak peek for you, I bought myself these. So these are Zhuin-Tech. I'm not sure quite how they're pronounced. Zhuin-Tech F1 brake calipers, and these are pretty well respected in their category as a well-performing caliper. So I'll be putting these, which are quite expensive actually, up against these cheapo calipers from AliExpress that I've been using thus far in an upcoming video. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Anyway, that is all that we've got time for in this cheeky little episode of Trace Fellow. So yeah, subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this episode that I've chucked together. And if you've got any questions or any comments about this Sensei Empire group set or group sets in general, then yeah, throw me a comment down below and I'll try to get back to as many of you as I possibly can. Anyway, that is all for now. So I will see you all in the next one. All right. See you later. Bye. Forever.